Thank you all for joining us this evening for the Kolel's annual themes of the Seder. Thank you to Rabbi Shabs for much behind-the-scenes arrangements. Thank you to all the participants for taking busy time to join us. And finally, thank you to the Rabbanim who are setting aside extremely busy schedules and obligations to share their wisdom and inspiration with us. A short thought of introduction before I turn over the floor to our other speakers. Human beings, and especially religious Jews, are pulled in many different directions. We have our internal realities and strivings, like being a better person. We have responsibilities to our family. Our shul and neighborhoods have their demands on us. The larger community we belong to have their needs. The nation of Israel as a whole also requires our attention. And finally, to the world at large and to our fellow human beings here on earth. Often people get sucked into one of these domains and become completely captured there. We might be hyper individualistic or too universal. For example, while being introspective and focused on self growth is a good thing, someone could become completely self absorbed and neglect to see the people around him or her. Or someone could be focused on helping the community, undertaking wondrous things, building magnificent organizations, but have little time for his or her own family. What does the Torah say about this fundamental and consequential issue? Turns out a lot, even if we'll leave the full development of the idea for a later time. For starters, the Korban Pesach is a blueprint for how we should address this. The Korban Pesach must uniquely be eaten b'chabura, a small pre-registered group, not alone, but in a defined, intimate circle. Yet the act itself only exists within the full national experience. Everyone ascending to the Mikdash, bringing the korban together. Based on Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, the idea emerges as follows. The first condition for the Korban Pesach is cheiros, is freedom, our own autonomy and responsibility for ourselves, having the capacity for agency, bechira, and the imperative for proper conduct, which we cannot have properly exercised as slaves to Paro. Second is family. V'yichu lahem ish sela beis avos sela bayis. This is our obligation to our spouse, our children, and our family. Then we have v'mimat habayis, the pasuk continues, mihios misa, if the family is not enough for a whole lamb, v'lakachu ushcheno hakarov el beso. He should take from his neighbors, his friends. These are the people close to us, beyond our own kin. For example, our neighbors and fellow shul members. And then we have V'shachatu also Kol Kahal Adas Yisrael, coming together as a nation, a people, a unity. A successful life, a Torah life, does not ask you to choose one of these domains to the exclusion of all else. But on the contrary, a successful Jewish life is where our different spheres of being are all recognized and exquisitely balanced, radiating out from a developed self to strong family, neighborhood, community, nation, people, and ultimately world. Each sphere properly recognized and engaged with, commensurate with its appropriate measure. This evening's themes of the Seder presentation is a beautiful example of people recognizing the different spheres of belonging in their Jewish life as they prepare for Pesach in their own homes, and members from all over the different shuls and areas of Greater Washington and beyond come together as a unity for inspiration and growth. It is now my privilege to turn over the program to this evening's other presenters, starting with Rabbi Wolobowski, who will be addressing us in a pre-recorded video message due to a scheduling conflict.
I want to open by saying a thank you and to acknowledge what a beautiful program, a community-wide program this is. Thank you, Rabbi Shaps, for coordinating it and the community kollel as a whole. We open the Seder with the first step of the 15 steps called Kaddish. Kaddish is when we make Kiddush, and it's the first of the 4 cups of wine that we drink. Now, many of you may be aware, why do we drink 4 cups of wine? It corresponds to the 4 expressions of redemption that we have in the Torah in relation to the Exodus of Egypt. V'hoitzeisi, v'hitzalti, v'go'alti, and v'lakachti. 4 expressions of Geula. Hashem will take us out of Egypt. V'hitzesi, v'hitzalti, He will save us. V'go'alti, He will redeem us. And v'lakachti, He will take us on to a nation. There's 4 expressions of Geula, and corresponding to that, we drink 4 cups of wine. Now, when we think of the Exodus of Egypt, when we think of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the actual food that comes to mind is not a cup of wine, it's actually the matzah. Which begs the question, why don't we have 4 matzahs? Each matzah to correspond to another expression of Geula. V'hitzesi, v'hitzalti, v'go'alti, and v'lakachti. Have 4 matzahs. 1 wine, 4 cups of wine. 4 cups of wine and 4 matzahs. But why are matzahs specifically 3 and wine is 4? So to appreciate it in a relatively short period of time, the difference, a characteristic difference between wine and matzah is intentionally called lechem oini. It's a simple bread. There's no taste. Wine, on the other hand, has taste, has pleasure, has enjoyment. Everybody has a different taste. Now, have in mind this idea that the wine has taste, has flavor, and matzah not so much. When the Yidden left Mitzrayim, when the Jewish people left Egypt, it says that we were taken out. Hashem took us out of Egypt. This was a process that Hashem imposed on us. He took us out of Egypt. He saved us. He brought us to the desert to be able to receive the Torah. These were actions that Hashem did to us. The fourth expression of Geula, V'hitzesi, Hashem took us out of Egypt. V'hitzalti, Hashem saved us. V'go'alti, Hashem redeemed us. And then v'lakachti. The last expression of v'lakachti is where God took us as a nation. Now remember, when Hashem took us as a nation, it took our involvement, our initiative. Hashem took the Torah to other nations, and when Hashem came to us, we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we're going to follow it. We invested in that step. The first 3 steps, we did not invest in. Hashem did it to us, did it for us without our own involvement. In short, that's why when it comes to the Seder, we have a matzah that corresponds to the first 3 expressions of Geula, because that's not something that we have an involvement, a flavor, a taste. It's more a humble bread that we acknowledge it, but we acknowledge what Hashem did for us. V'hitzesi, we have 1 matzah. V'hitzalti, we have another matzah. V'go'alti, we have a 3rd matzah. The 4th matzah, the 4th expression of Geula, we can't have a matzah for it, because that is more what we did, what we were involved in that process. And to highlight our involvement in the process, we have the 4th cup of wine. The 1st cup for the 1st expression of redemption, the 2nd for the 2nd, the 3rd for the 3rd, and the 4th one, because we, the people, were involved in that process, we highlight it with a cup of wine, different than the first 3, which we highlight with the matzah, because the matzah is something that Hashem brought upon us. So when we start our Seder, and we start our Seder and we take out the 1st cup of wine, we drink the first cup of wine in Kaddish, it's a journey. It's a journey that goes all the way to Matan Torah. And that's why we have four, because all four expressions of Geula, the first three are what Hashem did to us. The fourth one is we were involved in it. Because we're involved in it, our pleasure notes are hit. That's why we commemorate it with a cup of wine. When it comes to the matzah, we can commemorate the fourth one with a matzah, because a matzah symbolizes not our own involvement, but what Hashem did to us. On that note, I would like to wish everybody a kosher and freilich and Pesach, a time of family, a time of meaning, a time of celebration, with prayers for the ultimate redemption with the coming of Mashiach. May we merit that time. Bimheira v'yameinu amen.
Okay, thank you to Rabbi Volkovsky for preparing that and sending that to us. And thank you, Hashem, that actually came off. I think everybody was able to hear it. So I was anticipating technical difficulties, but I think it went smooth. So Baruch Hashem. Okay, so we're moving ahead in the Seder, and it's now my pleasure to call upon Rabbi Yosef Singer to speak about the beginning of Magid.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes, that's encouraging. I want to first of all thank Rabbi Winter and the community Kolo, Greater Washington, for putting together this wonderful program, and of course to Rabbi Hillel Shaps for doing the hard work of coordinating all the speakers and herding all the cats, and also for everybody who has taken time out of their very, very busy Pesach preparations to go ahead and not only prepare drushes, but to actually listen to the drushes. So I have a tremendous hakaras hatov. So thank you so much. I'd like to talk about halach ma'anya. There's many, many things to talk about, and the challenge of this particular drasha is to confine it to only 10 minutes. So I'll do the best I can. So halach ma'anya, Shmuel says that this is the bread, the lechem aini, this is the bread she'ainin alav devarim harba, the bread upon which we say many things. And the things that we say are things that speak to the mitzvah, Rashi says, of the Haggadah and Hallel, that we express our profound appreciation to the Ribono Shel Olam for all of the miracles that he performed in taking the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim and bringing about the redemption. So I would like to speak about the nature of miracles and what it is that the Jewish people did to go ahead and merit the revelation of Hashem in such a miraculous way. In order to do that, I would like to bring upon and draw upon something. I saw a beautiful vort from Rav Olshin that speaks to this issue. He brings down the Malbim in Parshas Kedoshim. And the Malbim says a very, very fundamental and very profound thought. He says that if we are Makadosh ourselves, meaning that if we go beyond our natural limitations, if we go beyond our teva, our natural limitations, and our moise nefesh, and give ourselves over to Hashem with all of our heart and soul, and exceed some of those limitations, then Hashem will go beyond his quote-unquote natural limitations. He will go beyond his teva. He will go beyond the rules of chemistry and physics and biology that keeps the world running, and he will go ahead and reveal himself in miraculous ways. So therefore, the Malbim says, in order for us to merit Hashem revealing himself in miraculous ways, we have to behave in some sense in a miraculous way. We have to go beyond our natural limitations. The Chafetz Chaim brings down in his Sefer Avis Chesed a beautiful, beautiful thought that speaks to this issue. He brings down the Eliyahu Rabbah, and he says the Eliyahu Rabbah asked the question, what it was that the Jewish people did to merit this tremendous miraculous intervention. And he brings down that they went ahead and they made a pact amongst themselves. Karsu bris yachid shiasu gemilus chasadim zeh. They made a pact in order to do kindness to one another. And this was in addition to their agreement not to change their language and their agreement not to change their names and so on. But they also made a pact to be kind to one another. They made a pact that even in the midst of terrible oppression, even in the midst of terrible hunger, even in the midst of eating a bread of affliction, they made a pact that they would share that bread of affliction with one another, that even in the midst of their own suffering and their own pain, they would still give of themselves to empathize with their fellow Jews, to be able to feel their pain and to be able to give them comfort. This is the Chafetz Chaim saying that this is the act of Mesiras Nefesh. This is the Mesiras Nefesh of Gemilus Chasadim that awakened in Shemayim Hashem's Mesiras Nefesh, so to speak, his going beyond Teva of Gemilus Chasadim. There's a beautiful story that's told about Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel when he met many great businessmen from the United States, and he asked them to go ahead and recount the lessons of the Holocaust. And he went around the table and he said, well, what do you think the lessons of the Holocaust were? And somebody said, never again. And Rabbi Finkel said, no, that's not the lesson of the Holocaust. That's not up to us. We can do our hishtadlus, but that's up to the Ribono Shel Olam. And he went around the table and each person tried to go ahead and answer the question. And finally, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel said, the lesson of the Holocaust was that when Jews were cold and they were freezing in their barracks and there was only one blanket to share among many Jews, there were some Jews who shared their blanket, who pushed the blanket and sacrificed their own comfort so that their fellow Jews could also have warmth. It's not to say that every Jew, Rachmana litzlan, who was in the Holocaust shared his blanket. And it's not to say that every story that exists in the Holocaust was always an act of tremendous heroism and so forth. But what he's saying is that if we are going to draw inspiration, if we are going to learn a lesson, we have to learn that even under the most difficult circumstances, human beings are still capable of greatness. Human beings are still capable of transcending their limitations and being Ma'aseh Nefesh and giving to one another in a way that passes their limitations and awakens tremendous chesed min hashamayim. He says this is what we can go ahead and learn from an enduring lesson from the pain and horror of the Holocaust. One enduring lesson. There's something that to take away, that every human being is capable of this kind of greatness. I saw in Matisyahu Solomon, he asked the question, he deals in his Matnas Chaim, he says that in one of the four questions we have, Shebacholo Leilos Enanu Mabilun Afilu Pamachas, that all the nights, all we do is we don't even dip once, but on this night on Pesach, we dip twice. We dip the Karpas, and then we go ahead and dip Charosis. And Matisyahu Solomon says that this two dipping corresponds to the two profound dippings of Jewish history. The first dipping was the dipping of Sinas Chinam that the brothers of Yosef did when they dipped his Kesonis Pasim in blood in order to go ahead and cover up the fact that they had sold him into slavery. And this is what brought us into Gullus. This is what started the exile. And the second dipping was Lakachtem Agudas Ezov. They went ahead and they took a bundle of hyssop and they dipped it in dam and put it on the mashko. And it represented the fact that the Jewish people were in Aguda Achas. They were one nation. They were one people, drawn to one another and connected to one another by acts of chesed. And that is the lesson of redemption. And this is why we go ahead and begin the Seder with Halach Ma'anya. This is the bread of affliction, because this bread of affliction did not stop the heroes of Mitzrayim and did not stop the heroes of Jewish history from extending and going beyond themselves in times of greatest sacrifice and in times of greatest depression. They were still capable of tremendous greatness. And this is the bread of affliction that brings the Geula. I want to just conclude with one story I just saw today from the Pesach Kron Haggadah of the Magid Seder, which was on this very topic of Halach Ma'anya. And the story is told about the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, who hosted a Seder for Israeli soldiers. And he began to say Halach Ma'anya. And then when he was in the middle of Halach Ma'anya, one of the soldiers went ahead and challenged him and said, how can I say Hashta Hacha Lashana Haba Ba'ara, the Yisrael Hashta Avde Lashana Haba B'nei Chor, and how can I say these words that next year we'll be in the land of Israel, this year we're slaves, next year we'll be free men? The soldier said, I am in Israel. I am a free man. This is a lie. This is not relevant to me. Why should I say this? And Rabbi Lau thought about it for a second and he answered and he said, over the years, I had the special privilege of davening Yom Kippur with some of the great Gedolei Yisrael, of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Reb Lezer Shach. And I remember hearing them say Vidui, Ashamnu, and Al Chet prayers, and they were crying their eyes out when they were saying these prayers. Do we really believe that Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Reb Shach were guilty of all the things that they were crying about in Ashamnu? And Rabbi Lau said, no, they were crying for their fellow Jews who were guilty of all of these averas. And they were crying for themselves because they were connected and they saw themselves as part of the Jewish people. And therefore, Rabbi Lau said, when we say halach ma'anya, what we are doing is holding this bread of affliction and we are connecting to all the Jewish people all over the world. We're connecting to the people who are suffering from tragedy, the people in the United States, the people in Eretz Yisrael, the people all over the world. All of our fellow Jews, we are connecting to them, and we are noise be'olim chavero, and we are feeling their pain and sharing their joy and feeling our brotherhood and sisterhood with them. And this is the lesson of halach ma'anya. Halach ma'anya is that we give of ourselves to our fellow Jews, and in so doing, we bring the redemption. Thank you. Achad kosher v'sameach.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Singer, for those inspiring words. Okay, our next speaker this evening, continuing in the theme of Magid, will be Rabbi Moshe Walter.
Hi, Shalom Aleichem to everybody. Thank you, Rabbi Shaps. Thank you, Rabbi Winter. And thank you to everybody for being here. It's such a pleasure to be able to connect Erev Yom Tov with everybody. I'd like to talk about something that I think is relevant always, but particularly this year. If we were to ask ourselves what number is the number that comes up most regularly at the Seder, I think Rabbi Vovosky touched on it a bit, is the number 4. 4 seems to be the number that comes up over and over and over again. There are 4 Lashonos of Geula, 4 languages of redemption, Votsesi, Vitzalti, V'galti, V'lakachti. There are 4 kosos, 4 cups of wine. There are 4 questions, 4 kushos in the Manashtana. There are 4 banim, 4 sons, the Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, the Elishal. There are actually 4 matzos. There are 3 matzos, but you cut the middle one. So you have one that's a prusa and one that's a shleimos. There are 4 matzos as well. Matzos and the yayin and the kushas and the Lashonos Agula, 4 seems to be the number that takes the day. There are different mahalchim to try to explain that. One classic one is it's Yud Kei Vav Kei, the 4-letter ineffable name of God, certainly represents 4. And tonight is the night of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Leil Yitzias Mitzrayim, the Seder, Lo Yodei Malach, Lo Yodei Saraf, Lo Yodei Shliach. That's also 4, by the way, El HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything revolves around 4. The Vilna Gaon has a different explanation. He says that Dalet Shrichim Hodos, there are 4 people that need to give acknowledgement and thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Somebody crosses over a sea, somebody crosses over the Midbar, somebody gets out of jail, somebody who is healed, and each of those occurred to the Jewish people as well, and therefore that's the way the Gra explains the number 4. I'd like to take another look at the number 4 and challenge that really it's not necessarily the number that takes the Seder, but really the number is 5. If you take a look, they're not really 4 Lashonos of Gula, but they're 5 Lashonos of Gula. V'hotzesi, v'itzalti, v'goalti, v'lekachti, the pasuk says, v'hevesi. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu will bring us into the land of Eretz Yisrael. So there are 5 Lashonos of Gula. There's really a 5th coast, the Kosh Shel Elio. So much so, the Rishonim, the Rif, and others indicate that there is a 5th coast, and even you'd make a bracha on that 5th coast. Yosef Tovelim and others, we don't paskin like that. There are 4 coastos, but nonetheless, there is a 5th coast called the Kosh Shel Elio, which we fill up. The Gra says there are not 4 questions at the Manishtan, but there's actually a 5th question. The first question is, Manishtan halayla zemi kol halaylas. Why is this night different than all other nights? On all other nights, there's never any Maisa mitzvah. Leil HaSeder, there are enormous amount of mitzvahs, 5 mitzvahs actually, that we fulfill Leil HaSeder. So there are not 4 questions, but the way the Gra understands actually 5 questions. Meforshei Haggadah point out they're not really 4 sons, 4, but there's really a 5th son. The tzaddik, the opposite of the Rasha, is a tzaddik, not a chacham. The chacham is also an individual who's wise, but there's a tzaddik. The tzaddik isn't mentioned. The tzaddik is the 5th son. Not only are there 4 matzahs, but one could argue that there are 5 kizesim of matzah that you eat leil haseder. According to many shitas, that you have 2 kizesim for motzi matzah, you have 2 kizesim for the afikomen, and 1 for korech. So although there are 4 matzahs, you eat 5 kizesim. So if you take a look at the number 4, there seems to be a battle taking place between the number 4 and number 5. Are there 4 Lashonas of Gula or are there 5 Lashonas of Gula? Are there 4 kosos or are there 5 kosos? Are there 4 questions or are there 5 questions? Are there 5 sons or are there 4 sons or are there 5 sons? Are there 4 matzahs or are there 5 kizesim? If you take a look in Magid, this battle seems to continue. If you look in the beginning of Magid, the Baal Haggadah says, "Vafilu kulanu chachamim, nevonim, zkenim, yodim esatora, mitzvah leinu lasaper yitzias Mitzrayim." The mitzvah of Yitzias Mitzrayim is speaking to 4 different types of people: chachamim, nevonim, zkenim, yodim esatora. 4 different individuals are required to understand the Haggadah. The next passage in Magid speaks about the great Tanaim who were sitting down to the Seder in Bnei Brak. How many Tanaim were there? There were 5. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, Bishur Belazar. The battle of 4 and 5 continues, and in the next passage, you see Baruch Hamakom Baruch Hu, Baruch Shanasan Torah Baruch Hu is 4 Baruchs. There seems to be a very, very implicit and almost explicit debate taking place at the Seder between the numbers 4 and 5. And if you get to the end of Magid, you'll see a machlokes Tanaim, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva. How many makkos were there? Were there 40 or 50 makkos? And both Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva explain that it's either 10 times 4, which is 40, or 10 times 5, which is 50. Each makkah came with either 4 makkos or 5 makkos. So throughout the Haggadah, there seems to be a very interesting and a sublime debate taking place between the numbers 4 and 5. What is the explanation? What's happening? How do we understand these numbers? And what's the significance? There are 4 sides to a square. There are 4 directions in the world. There's north, there's south, there's west, and there's east. There are 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. There are 4 yesodos. The philosophers point out there's earth, water, air, and fire. The Kuzari explains that there are 4 yesodos. There's a domem, an inanimate object. There's a tzomeach, which is plant life. There's a chai, which is the animal kingdom. And then there's a medaber. The Mishnah records in Maseches Rosh Hashanah several times in the first parak that they're Daled Rosh Hashanim hem. The number 4 seems to speak to Olam Hazeh. It seems to speak to a finite reality, to this world. There are 4 sides to a square and there's nothing more. It's exact, it's a unit, it's a cube. There are 4 directions in the world. There's north, there's south, there's east, there's 4 seasons. There are 4 yesodas, there are 4 Rosh Hashanah. 4 speaks to absolute, to a fact, to a cube, to something that's very specific and that can't be moved or altered. However, the number 5 seems to go beyond that. In the Mekubalim, they explain, it's even, the Rambam talks about this in Hilchos Yisod Torah, that there's actually a 5th Yisod, and that's the Olam HaGalgalim, the world of the cosmos, the moon, the sun, the stars. That's 5. The 5th Yisod, beyond earth, water, air, and fire, there's the Olam HaGalgalim, the world of the cosmos. In the Kuzri Hasheni, he says that beyond the domem, the tzomeach, the chai, the medaber, the 4 yesodas, there's the Yisrael, there's the Yehudi, somebody who's such a bigger, above and beyond. We are that. And it seems to be that the number 5 speaks to something much larger, much bigger. And what happens, Leila Seder, is that the number 5 comes to battle number 4. The 5th coast comes to tell us, Vehevesi, we're not satisfied just with Vahotseisi, Vihitzalte, Vigoalte, Vilkafte. We want to go beyond that. Vehevesi, and who heralds that? It's the 5th coast, it's the Koshel Eliyahu. And that's the 5th son, that's the tzaddik. And that's why there are 5 kizesim of matzah. The number 5 speaks to the interest, the desire to go beyond what is here, what is right now. It's no coincidence, of course, that there are chamish chumshei Torah, that there are aseres hadibros, 5 on each side. And the number 5 speaks to what is above, what's beyond. And that's why Leil HaSeder, the matzah that we eat is not square, but the matzah that we eat is round. Because round speaks to something that can't be contained. Asir HaKadosh Baruch Hu lasos machal atzadik, and the Gemara says in Maseches Tainis, then in the future, everybody will be standing around in a circle and pointing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying, Zekeli v'anveyu. If you remember in Sefer Bereshis, there was a battle between 4 kings versus 5 kings. And who wins? 4. The 4 kings defeat the 5 kings because in Olam Hazeh, in this world, the number 4 always trumps the number 5. But Leil HaSeder, there's a comeback, and the number 5 tries to overwhelm and to overcome the number 4. And that's why there's the 5th Lashon of Gula V'Haves. That's why there's the 5th Kosh to Kosh Leo. That's why there's the 5th son, the Tzaddik, who we're waiting for to reveal himself. And that's why the number 5 comes and responds with the Chameshes Tanoim. Rabbi Akiva is not satisfied there could be just be 40 makkos, 10 times 4, but there's a 50th makkah because the number 5 comes to speak to what's above, what's beyond, what is unable to be accomplished in Olam Hazeh. Leil HaSeder, when we sit down to the Seder, we recognize that we're going from Galus to Gula. We recognize that we're in this world. We recognize we're in the world of Olam Hazeh, that there are 4 sides to a square, that there are 4 directions of the earth, there are 4 seasons and 4 Yisodos. But we're not satisfied with that. And Leil HaSeder, we push to be able to accomplish and to reach above and beyond what Olam Hazeh has to offer, and to push for Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim. The only time we recite that in the Jewish liturgy is in 2 evenings of the year, Leil HaSeder and at Kol Nidre and at Ne'ilah. Those 2 evenings are evenings where we touch Shemaim and Aretz. Ne'ilah Psach Sharei Shemaim. The number 5 reappears and is introduced because there is a synergy and there's a correlation and connection between Shemaim and Aretz. And Leil HaSeder, the same thing takes place. That we are touching the number 5. We are touching what's beyond, what's above, and what is not within this world. And that's what we're always waiting for, pining for, hoping for. And that's the battle that takes place, Leil HaSeder, between 4 and 5. And the number 5 is that which stays with us forever. And that's why the minig is, amongst many, that the Kosh Shel Eliyahu is not even removed. That the Kosh Shel Eliyahu is filled up and it stays till the next day. And might there not even be a problem of having a Kosh Pogum. And you use that for the Kiddush that you make at the Suda of Pesach morning. And that is what we have to consider and to contemplate and to think about this year, Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, with the stress and the struggles and the pain, the suffering of Klal Yisrael, not to forget and not to get lost in the number 4, not to get lost in the world that we live on, but to continue to think like Rabbi Akiva about the future. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what we have, knows what we're capable of, knows what we're waiting for. And as Rabbi Akiva, who saw the world differently, that when all the Tanoim, the end of Maseches Makkos, were crying, when they saw the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, what was Rabbi Akiva doing? Rabbi Akiva was laughing, because he was able to see beyond the square, beyond the seasons, beyond the corners of the world. He was able to see one step forward. And that's the number 5. Be'ezras Hashem, we should be zocha to the ultimate gula, b'meher v'yameinu, to the Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, and b'siyata d'shmai, we should be zocha to gula shlema b'meher v'yameinu. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Walter, for that very fascinating take. It's now my pleasure. We're going to move ahead in the Seder. We're moving quick tonight. And I'd like to introduce Rabbi David Rosenbaum, who I believe is going to speak about Safun.
You didn't have to ask me to unmute. That was very kind of you. Thank you, Rabbi Shabs. Thank you, Rabbi Winter. Thank you, all the rabbis and all the people taking the time to join tonight. The idea of tzafun, of eating the afikoman, is really a fascinating thing when you think about it. The afikoman is intended to commemorate the Korban Pesach. Rabbi Walter was talking about the ultimate redemption. We should merit speedily. We should have the Beis HaMikdash. When we have the Beis HaMikdash, we won't eat matzah alone after the meal. We'll have the Korban Pesach. But until that point, we eat the matzah, the afikoman, as a commemoration of the Korban Pesach, the matzah that we have following the meal. When you think about it, the Korban Pesach is very much probably the central component of the Seder. And the way the Torah describes the function of or the importance of the Korban Pesach is Asher Pasach al Botei Bnei Yisrael, B'Nagpos B'Tzrayim V'Spatenu Yitzil. That it's a special offering that we remember that God passed over the Jewish homes when he brought the plague of the firstborn upon the Egyptian homes. And it's such an interesting thing to think about. That's the core, that there happened to be a plague, that God saved the Jews and struck the Egyptians. That's not the core. The core is that we were saved. The core is that we were freed. But I think there's a very important point here, that the underlying theme of all of that freedom is our chosen status, that God looks at the Jewish people and God has this special affection for the Jewish people. It's not only that there's a God who makes sure that everything is fair and just, it's that we have a very special place in God's world. And to me, that's one of the most important things that we need to think about at the Seder. And we need to, those of us fortunate enough to have children sitting with us at the Seder, to impart that special status of Klal Yisrael. Another, I think, very, very essential point to think about when we reflect on the Korban Pesach is that the Korban Pesach is the first active role the Jewish people have in the story. Somebody made reference earlier this evening. There's so many wonderful, I think Rabbi Vovovsky, there's so many wonderful plagues that God brings upon the Egyptians. The Korban Pesach is a different story. The Jews were passive for much of the story. The Korban Pesach, the Jews have to step forward and do a mitzvah. And it wasn't just the greatest ones among Klal Yisrael. It was Klal Yisrael. So that's another theme to think about at the Seder. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu has such great value and treasures each and every one of our mitzvos. I think that's also core to what we're supposed to be thinking about. But what I want to reflect on for another few moments is a very interesting maral. And there are many, many specific halachos about the Korban Pesach, but I just want to highlight a few of them, also some of them touched on already. I think Rabbi Winter spoke about the fact that various people come together for the Korban Pesach. It's not just one person doing the Korban Pesach, it's a family doing the Korban Pesach. And once I come for that Korban Pesach, I have to be associated with one specific Korban Pesach. I can't Korban Pesach hop. I can't be associated with your Korban Pesach and your Korban Pesach, and I have to choose one Korban Pesach. So a number of people come together for one. There's another halacha, the Korban Pesach specifically has to be roasted over an open fire. If you would cook the Korban Pesach in liquid, the more liquid that goes into the meat, the more loosely the meat of the animal will be held together. When you roast the animal over a fire, the liquid comes out, which means the animal comes together more tightly. And finally, though there are more halachos, but the last halacha we'll focus on is one is prohibited from breaking the bones of the Korban Pesach. And the Maral says that all of these ideas speak to separate, disparate things coming together as one. And the Maral says that the avod of the Korban Pesach is to recognize Achdus Habore, the oneness of God in the world, that everything that happens is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the avodah that the Jewish people had to do Seder night. And that's a very powerful thing to think about. The Jewish people had experienced so much pain, so much difficulty. The Jewish people over these last months have experienced great miracles and great freedom and about to have great redemption. Which one is from God? Well, it's easy to see that God brings us great blessings and great freedom. It's a wonderful thing to think about. Can you wrap your mind around all the pain that the Jewish people experienced in Egypt before the story got going? How could the Jews think about that? Is that from the same God? That's the avodah of Achdus Habore. That's the avodah of recognizing that there's so much for which we have to thank God, and so much that we don't understand, and we might never understand. And yet we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we say, we serve you, and we embrace you, and we embrace the fact that we don't understand everything that happens in your world, but we're so grateful for you for the many things that we can wrap our minds around. I think it's a fascinating shot in the Korban Pesach, and I think it's extremely relevant this year. We have so many remarkable things. The Jewish people have so many remarkable things in which we saw the great hand of God over this past year and earlier as well. And there are so many things that we don't understand, so many things that we can't fully wrap the mind around. And in many ways, the avoda of the Korban Pesach is to accept that. Accept the fact that we don't understand and embrace the chaste abore, the kindnesses from above, and state with great, great emunah that we believe the day will come where everyone will understand that everything is from Hashem and we won't be conflicted and confused anymore. It should be with Hashem's will that that day should come speedily.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Rosenbaum, for those very meaningful words. Okay, we are moving on ahead in the Seder, and it's now my pleasure to call upon Rabbi Ariel Ben Chorin to speak about Hallel.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Shaps. Thank you, Rabbi Winter, and thank you for putting together this wonderful program. I've already gotten a lot of chizik and beautiful ideas that I'm holding with me. I'd like to talk about Hallel. Specifically, there is a fascinating Gemara that describes what Hallel looked like on Pesach night at the times when we had a temple. Hallel, the things that we say to Hashem, it's an obligation. Anytime we're celebrating the redemption of a Jewish people or a Yom Tov, we say Hallel. But the Gemara describes the Hallel in Yerushalayim, the night of the Seder, as follows. Amar Rav Mishum Rabbi Chia, Rav said in the name of Rabbi Chia, Kizeisa pischa v'halela paka igra. Everyone would eat a kazayit, the requisite amount of the korban, of the sacrifice, and then halela paka igra. Hallel would burst the roof open. The words of the Gemara, Hallel would crack the roof. What does it mean Hallel would crack the roof? The Rashbam explains, there were so many people saying Hallel, so loud, that it sounded in Yerushalayim as if the roof was bursting off the ceilings, off of the buildings. Not only that, they would actually go onto the roof to say the Hallel. They would finish their meal, they would bench, they would take their fourth cup, they would go onto the roofs and say Hallel. And it was so loud, because so many people were saying it at the same time with such a loud voice and such jubilation, that it sounded as if the roofs were coming off of the buildings. This vivid description. So I wanted to reflect on this imagery here. It's a fascinating thing. There's no requirement to say Hallel on the roof. Not that I'm aware of. What is this strange thing that we find that the entire Jewish people in Yerushalayim had this instinctive need to go up onto the roof to say the Hallel? Like the Gemara says, Imlav Neviim Hem, B'nai Neviim Hem, even the Jews who are not prophets are the sons of prophets. And if you see the Jewish people doing something, you can dig a little deeper to find the meaning and some depth in their behavior. So I'd like to explore this idea of going onto the roof to say Hallel and maybe suggest some reasons why it turned out this way. The truth is the question's even greater, perhaps. The Gemara says that when you eat a sacrifice, like the Pesach, for example, you're eating the Pesach sacrifice, it has to be eaten within the walls of Yerushalayim. You have to be within the boundaries of Jerusalem while you're eating the sacrifice. However, if you go onto the roof, it's no longer allowed. You're no longer within the confines of Yerushalayim. The roofs were not kadosh. They weren't consecrated. So you have a fascinating thing. The Jewish people were all in Yerushalayim, in the holy city of Yerushalayim, in the place which is so unique that it's the one place you could eat sacrifices. And now they finish their mitzvah and they leave this holy place. You go onto the roof, it's like you've left Yerushalayim. You're not in the city anymore. You're going to leave the city? To do the mitzvah of Hallel, you're leaving the Makom Kadosh, the holy place? Why would you do such a thing? So, I'd like to suggest 4 answers. One question and 4 answers, a little bit reversed in the Seder. The first is as follows. The Rishonim get into a technical discussion about the differences of the Hallel we say at the Seder versus other times. We don't bless on the Hallel, we say it sitting down. it's interrupted in the middle. We say some in the beginning, some in the end. Why is it so different? So the Gaonim said that this Hallel is different than any other Hallel we say the rest of the year. The rest of the year, when we recite Hallel, like on Sukkot, on Shavuot, on Chanukah, that's called Kriya. That's a recitation. You're reciting Hallel to remember the miracles that Hashem did for us. On Passover night, you're not reciting Hallel, you're singing Hallel. You're saying it because of Shira. What's the distinction? On Pesach night, we're not remembering what was. We are living it ourselves. As we say in the Haggadah itself, we're living it ourselves. And so we're singing the Shira. It's not that we're saying Hallel for what Hashem did, but what he's doing right now. He's taking us out of it and we're singing it. So perhaps you could suggest as follows. We are singing Hallel as if we ourselves are leaving Egypt. Who composed Hallel? The Gemara has a whole list of suggestions who composed it. The earliest source for Hallel, the Hallel that we say, B'tzeis Yisrael, Mimitzrayim, and all those chapters, that Moshe and the Jewish people, following the splitting of the sea, they're the ones who sang Hallel for the first time. They sang the song of the sea, Az Yashir, and they also sang Hallel. So perhaps here as well, I want to insert one point. The 4 cups we said correspond to the 4 languages of Geula, as we've heard many times in beautiful different ways here. We're now by cup number 4. Between cup number 3 and cup number 4, that's a huge transition. Cup number 3 is when we left Egypt, V'ga'alti. Cup number 4 is when we received the Torah, V'lakachti, when Hashem takes us to him for a nation, when he embraces us under the mountain of Har Sinai. So cup number 3 is V'ga'alti. We just left Egypt, and we have not yet entered Hashem's embrace. We've not yet received the Torah. We are recreating that. We're leaving Yerushalayim as if we don't have the Kedusha yet. We're not within Hashem's embrace just yet. We're going to say Hallel as if we just left Egypt, and then we're going to enter into Hashem's embrace. So to recreate the original Hallel, which was composed by the people who left Egypt, we ourselves leaving Egypt are saying the Hallel before entering the covenant with Hashem, which will be on Shavuos, the giving of the Torah. Perhaps you could say another answer. Why do they say Hallel on the roof? Why insist on that? So we know, you just observe the world, a person's inner state would be reflected outwardly, right? Typically, if a person has very organized thoughts, everything inside is straight and put together, then around him, his clothes will be organized, his room will be organized, and so on. If a person is very angry, you'll find they'll break things, they'll throw things, they'll tear things up. The children will scribble. Right? This is their inner. What's our inner state? We're not reciting Hallel, we're singing it. When a person's filled with gratitude to Hashem, he's so overflowing with love and joy. He wants no boundaries, nothing holding him back. I can't even handle that there are walls around me. I have to go up onto the roof because my inner state, the expectation of a Jew on Pesach night, and what they actually achieved in Yerushalayim was they achieved a state where they were so overwhelmed with joy and gratitude to Hashem that they couldn't even handle having walls around them. They wanted the outsides to express their insides. My inside is expansive and abundant, and that's what I want also the outside to be. So I went onto the roof to say the Hallel so that I can reflect my insides as well. Like we say Nishmas in the Haggadah itself, if our mouths were filled with song like the ocean and our hands were outstretched, right? We use the grandest expressions to describe our inner state of joy and gratitude to be connected to Hashem. And that perhaps also is why they went onto the roof. So first of all, it was to recreate the order. We left Egypt, and before coming into the holiness, before we were in Yerushalayim, so to speak, we first said the Hallel, so too now. Number 2 is we don't want any boundaries around us. Just like our gratitude is overflowing, so too we want the scenery to be overflowing and abundant, only the expansive sky above us. The third is a fascinating point we find throughout the Seder, and specifically in Hallel as well. We're here celebrating our freedom throughout the entire night. And in Hallel, we're singing about that freedom which we achieved, the Geula, the redemption that Hashem gave us. But there is a tremendous emphasis on the pain and the struggle that preceded. We eat the maror, we describe the bitterness. And throughout the Hallel, we talk about how the non-Jews scoffed at us. And we have to talk about, Lo lanu Hashem, don't do it for your sake, but do it for your honor, Hashem, because everyone's making fun of Hashem and the Jewish people. Right? We talk about the lowly and degraded state of the Jewish people. The Gemara says that's an essential component of Hallel. An essential component of Hallel is Yeridasan Shel Tzadikim, the downgrading of righteous people. And the throwing of people into a furnace, historically, is also when they recited Hallel, when they went down and then they came up. You have to emphasize the bad and then the good. Because it's very understandable why, right? When you want to say thank you, you can only fully say it and appreciate it when you realize how bad things were. Yeah, if you're standing outside shivering, that's when you'll appreciate a good sweater. But if you started in a heated room, you're never going to appreciate how warm you are, right? So here also you have to appreciate. Once we've been redeemed, you have perspective. You have perspective. All of that suffering, all of the lo lanu Hashem lo lanu, don't do it for our sake, do it for your sake, all of the hardship that we had, we now see it as part of the grander picture of Hashem creating a relationship with us. If it wasn't for those hard times, we wouldn't feel as connected to Him. We wouldn't be as indebted to Him, even though we're infinitely indebted, but even more now. And the rooftop gives you perspective. That's my cute suggestion. Yeah, you go onto the roof, you could see the whole scene in front of you. You're not limited to a narrow focus. You don't just see the room, you see the whole city. You see the whole city. The ceiling bursts off. There's nothing blocking your perspective. When you're standing in a point of geula, of redemption, you can see the whole scene in front of you very beautifully. Finally, perhaps you could suggest, why did they go on to the roof, the unconsecrated roofs? You're not part of Yerushalayim, and that's where you want to say Hallel. So going into the unholy places, the non-holy places, that is a theme throughout Pesach. What a strange thing that there's a prohibition to eat chametz already the afternoon before the holiday starts. Where do we have such a thing? You bring the sacrifice for the Yom Tov before Yom Tov ever starts. In the middle of your day. You drive to the Beis HaMikdash. You don't have to. Yeah, you drive to the Beis HaMikdash. You park your car. You'd have to walk from a millah, whatever. It's the middle of a chol. It's a mundane day, and that's when you're bringing the sacrifices. That's when you're doing the work. That's the point of Pesach. The point of Pesach was to create a relationship, which will not just exist on the Yom Tovim, not just in times of Kedusha. It will exist outside of Yerushalayim, outside of the times of glory. It will exist on our day-to-day life. Hashem took us out of Egypt so that we can relate to Him in every way, in every time, in every place. So when we're expressing our gratitude, we go outside of Yerushalayim to say, Hashem, this relationship will overflow into every aspect of my life. On Seder night, we're creating the image in our mind of how in love we are with Hashem and how much He cares for us. So that should flow into the rest of the year. The rest of the year, we're just unpacking what happened at Seder night. We're just unpacking what happened then. And the idea is to unpack it into the weekday, into the mundane, into the chol. So these perhaps are the 4 reasons why that the Jewish people went up onto the roofs to say Hallel on Seder night in Yerushalayim, to burst off the roofs. Number 1 is they were recreating before going into a holy place, before going to Hashem's embrace. They said Hallel just like the Jews originally said Hallel and Yetzias Mitzrayim. Number 2 is they were feeling so overflowing with joy that they couldn't have any boundaries around them. That's how they felt internally, and that's how we should be feeling on Seder night. Number 3 is, at a time of Geula, of redemption, it gives you perspective. You could stand on the rooftop, so to speak, and see how all the pieces fit together. I see that the suffering in Egypt actually was productive. I see that all the tsaros that the Jewish people have suffered throughout history are actually leading to a greater revelation of Hashem's name and a greater closeness between Him and us. And finally, we leave the Makom Kaddish, we leave the holy place as the ultimate message of Pesach is to take that relationship and live with it in our daily lives, in our places which are not, so to speak, Yerushalayim. The regular days, in your car, at a traffic light, in the middle of your arguments, all those places. That's where our relationship should flow into, starting with Pesach night. Everyone should have Hatzlacha in their Hallel and Chag Kasher V'Sameach. And thank you again for this wonderful program.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Ben-Chorin, for those inspiring ideas and uplifting thoughts. So as the final speaker for tonight, it's my job to speak about the end of the Seder. But I'd like to use, I guess we call it poetic license, not necessarily address the end of the Seder, but rather I want to speak about the end of the Exodus. Now, the Exodus had many points that one might call the end. You might call Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, the end. or our entry into Eretz Yisrael. What I mean by the end, not looking so far out, but I want to consider the end of the fulfillment of the promise that Hashem gave to Abraham at the Bris Bein Abasarim, at the covenant between the parts. When Hashem appeared to Abraham, he said to him, Yadoa Teidak, Higer Yezeracha Beretz Lo Lahem. You should know that your descendants will be Gerim, they will be strangers in a foreign land. Va'avadum v'inu osam arba me'oshana. They will be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years. And also the nation that enslaves them, I will judge them, I will punish them. And afterwards they're going to go out with great wealth. And throughout the Seder, we talk about how we were strangers, how we were afflicted, and how the Egyptians were punished. And as we get close to the redemption, Hashem tells Moshe, Daber na be'oznei ha'am, speak please in the ears of the nation, and they should go and request from the Egyptians klei chesef u'klei zahav, vessels of silver, vessels of gold. And in truth, this isn't the first time that Hashem has told Moshe about this idea. Already in their first encounter at the burning bush, Hashem tells him, I'm going to strike the Egyptians with all of my wonders, and I'm going to send you forth, and I'm going to give place the chen, the grace of the Jewish people in the eyes of the Egyptians, and you're not going to go out empty-handed. You'll borrow, you'll request, you'll take from the Egyptians, again, various things, including klei chesef u'klei zahav, vessels of silver, vessels of gold. Why is this so important that the Jewish people take the gold and the silver with them when they leave Mitzrayim? And to add to the question, the Gemara tells us, why did Hashem have to say daber na? Hashem says to Moshe, please speak to the Jewish people. Please get them to go and request gold and silver from the Egyptians. So the Gemara says that Hashem was telling Bivakasha mimcha, I request, I beg you that they have to take the gold and the silver. Why? Shelo yomar oso tzaddik, so that that righteous individual, Avraham Avinu, doesn't have a claim on me, doesn't have tainus on me. He might come to me and he'll say, Va'avadim vinu osam kimlem, you fulfilled the part of your promise that you will enslave them and afflict them, but ve'acharechen yetzu b'rchush gadol lo kimlem, but you didn't fulfill the part of the promise that said that you'll take them out with great wealth. Hashem says, please make sure the Jewish people take from the Egyptians, go out with great wealth. Otherwise, Avraham Avinu is going to come with me with tainas, with claims. How could you not have fulfilled that part of the promise? Now, I don't know, but I would think that that would be the last thing on Avraham's mind. They were enslaved, they were afflicted. He really cares. The main thing is that you take them out. Does he really care? That they go out with great wealth? Is that so important? The Gemara says the people didn't even care at that point. They just wanted to get out. They would have rather gotten out early and not had to go out with great wealth. So why is this so important? It's very difficult to understand why this is so important to Avram. Why would he care? What's this all about? That we have to go out with great wealth. Now it's story is told that Rav Chaim Brisker, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, once asked his young son, who later became the Brisker of Rav Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik. But when he was a young boy, he asked him, why don't we commemorate at the Seder this idea of that we went out with great wealth? Why don't we commemorate that at the Seder? And the young boy, he answered that, well, we commemorate being freed from Egypt because we're still free from Egypt. But great wealth, he said, we don't have anything left of that. So there's nothing to commemorate in terms of that. It was a child's answer. Now, of course, that was before the Jewish people discovered nursing homes. But Rav Yisrael Solomon suggests that actually we do commemorate this at the Seder. We do commemorate V'achrei King Yitzur B'Chush Gadol. We do commemorate the great wealth that we went out with. In the opening halachos of the Seder, the Shulchan Aruch says that a person should arrange their table with kelim naim, with beautiful vessels, as much as they can. Actually, there are those who take out their nicest vessels, whether they're going to use them or not, just to have them out on the table. And a person should prepare for themselves a nice seat, a nice chair, and they should be able to sit, leaning comfortably, derech eris, in a way of freedom. Ramadisyahu says that this is, he infers it from the Vilna Gaon's comments, but he says this is to commemorate this idea that we left with great wealth, that we left like princes and princesses. But again, why is this important? Why do we need to commemorate this? It's so important that Hashem had to tell Moshe about it at the burning bush. It's so important that Avraham would come and with claims that if it wasn't fulfilled. And so important that we have to commemorate it at the Seder, to sit like kings. The answer, says Ramat Yisrael Solomon, can be found in a pasuk in Yeshaya. The pasuk says that Hashem says, Li avdi ata Yisrael, you are my servant Yisrael, asher becha espa'ar, that I gain splendor from you. You bring me splendor, you bring me honor. You are my servant Israel who brings me honor. That the role of the Jewish people is not just to serve Hashem, but to bring him splendor. And what brings more honor to Hashem? Someone who's broken, desperate, decides to accept Hashem's mitzvos, or a prince and a princess, royalty, that they accept the mitzvos. Certainly the second group, that brings more honor to Hashem. And before we receive the Torah, Hashem says, Vatem tiyuli mamleches kohanim v'goy kadosh. You're going to be a mamleches kohanim, a kingdom of kohanim. Now, are we kohanim? We're not kohanim. What does it mean we're going to be? I mean, some people are, but most of us aren't. So what does it mean we're going to be a mamleches kohanim? Rashi says that kohanim in this context means sarim, means officers, and means princes. Hashem says you're going to be a kingdom of princes. It's a kingdom of princes that has to come and accept the Torah. When a nation of princes accepts the Torah, that brings the greatest level of splendor to Hashem. It's for that reason, actually, that an Eved Ivri, an indentured servant, cannot remain that way permanently. You can't remain. You have to go out at Yovel. You have to go free at the Jubilee year. Pasuk says, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. Hashem says, because Yisrael is avadim to me, and Chazal teach us, V'lo avadim la'avadim. They can't be a servant to a servant, meaning you can't be a servant to someone who's a servant to Hashem. You have to be directly a servant to Hashem. You can't permanently be a servant to someone who's just a servant, to a human being. And the reason is because if a person is subjugated by the will of another human being, then it degrades their ability to bring honor to Hashem. The person's lowly. They're not someone who, in serving Hashem, brings him honor. To bring honor to Hashem, to bring the highest level of honor, we have to be princes. We have to be regal. We have to be royal. And this is why it was so important that the Jewish people leave Egypt, Birchush Gadol, with great wealth, a nation that had been through so much. They were battered, they were broken. If they were to stumble to Sinai and take the role of Hashem's chosen people, that would be drastically less honor, drastically minimize the honor brought to Hashem by a nation accepting the Torah. But instead, they're loaded with riches, and they leave biyad ramah, with a raised fist, confidently and regally arriving to accept the Torah as a mamleches kohanim, a kingdom of princes. There's something very peculiar if we come back to Avraham Avinu. It's very interesting how he reacts to the bris bein habesarim. We know it actually happened after, but when Hashem comes to Avraham and tells him that he's going to destroy Sodom, how does Avraham react? So pasuk after pasuk of beseeching Hashem, bargaining with Hashem, spare them, spare them. But when Hashem comes to him and tells him, your descendants are going to be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years, 410 years, how does Avraham react? Doesn't seem to give a peep. Doesn't daven, doesn't argue. Where's the davening? Where's the begging? Why not? Why is he silent? So Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi in the Maaseh Hashem, he explains there's only one conclusion we can draw. The promise that your descendants are going to be enslaved and they're going to be taken out with their enemies are going to be judged, they're going to go out with great wealth. It must have been good news to Avram. He wouldn't want it any other way. And the question is why? Why is that good news? Why doesn't he daven? Why doesn't he complain? So the Maaseh Hashem explains, Avram had one goal in life, one primary goal, to spread the knowledge of Hashem to the entire world. People should know that he created it and continues to run the world. And that's why it was so important to Avram that he have children, so that he could create a nation that would bring this knowledge to the world. And Avram understood that if his descendants were to descend to the lowest depths, enslaved, beaten, battered, and then emerge with miracles and wonders that bring their tormentors to justice, the world will come to recognize Hashem's existence, his omnipotence, his involvement in the world, and for that nation to then stand at Har Sinai and accept the role as Hashem's representatives in the world, that would be the fulfillment of Avram's greatest dreams. But he also understood that for this to be accomplished to its fullest, they would have to stand as a kingdom of princes, regal and proud, and at the same time completely subservient to the Creator. That's why it was so important that they come out with great wealth. That's why he would have come with tainas, with claims. He wanted to see the full fulfillment of his dreams of a nation that would represent Hashem in the world and bring the greatest honor to Hashem in this world. The Maharal writes that once the status of Bnei Melachim, of the princes, has been bestowed upon us when we left Egypt, it can't be taken away. Like Chazal tell us, Kol Yisrael Bnei Melachim. We're all princes, we're all princesses, we're all royal. It's part of our identity, given to us at Yetzias Mitzrayim. And when we sit down at our Seders, we're instructed to set out our best dishes, sit in our most comfortable chairs. It's an opportunity to remind ourselves and our children that we are a Mamleches Kohanim. We are a kingdom of princes, and we have to take pride in that. And this is one of the most important messages of the Seder, of Pesach, to appreciate how incredible it is to be a part of Klal Yisrael. But it's not only about feeling good about ourselves and feeling confident in who we are. The very fact that we are proud and regal and serving Hashem at the same time, that brings honor and splendor to Hashem. What an honor for us to be able to bring splendor to Him. Yisrael Asher B'cha Esbar. We're the nation that Hashem says about us that you bring splendor to me, you bring me honor. Chazal teach us that we were redeemed in Nisan, and in the future, we are to be redeemed in Nisan once again. May it be Hashem's will that this year He answer the tefillah we say each time we bench. Hashem should bring us standing upright and tall and proud and regal to our land, back to our land, with the Bias Gal Tzedek, coming the Redeemer B'mheira V'yameinu. I'd like to once again thank everyone for coming tonight, for joining, for taking time out of your schedule. Thank all of the Rabbanim for really an incredibly busy time, for taking the time to prepare and teach and share and inspire, and wishing everybody a Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
Chag Kasher V'Sameach, everyone. Thank you. Thank all the Rabbanim and participants. Be good gebench to Pesach and a good year for Klal Yisrael.